In this video, we are going to talk about why CGC is such a dominant force when it comes to graded comic books, but also we're going to highlight a few reasons why you may want to focus on CGC books. Stay tuned. Reggie here, and I want to welcome you to another one of my videos. As I mentioned, we are going to spend some time talking about why CGC is such a dominant force and why you may want to pick up comics that are graded by CGC. Now, I can tell you for a fact that there are a lot of people out there that have opinions about CGC, whether it be their pricing, some of their policies, their recent changes to labels, whatever it might be. There are a lot of opinions, and I think folks are entitled to those opinions. I will, however, try to focus on some of the more factual things as it relates to CGC that I think make them such a dominant force now and potentially into the future. If you haven't already subscribed to the channel, I want to ask you to do that for me right now. Go ahead and turn on notifications, and that way you won't miss out on any of the content. For those people that are not familiar with graded comics, I want to spend a few minutes talking about that before focusing on CGC. Generally speaking, grading a comic means that you are sending it off to a third party of some sort that is going to evaluate that comic. They are going to use their expertise to confirm that that comic is authentic, that it is free of defects, or they will explain and highlight what those defects are. But they will use their expertise to essentially evaluate that comic and assign a grade to it. As part of that, that comic is encapsulated, wrapped in some type of archivable plastic, and a grade is placed upon that book. Now, what's great about this is that through this process, that comic is preserved, it is protected, and then it is also evaluated by that impartial third party. And through this process, that comic actually has some value that is being realized. Now, this isn't to say that raw books are not valuable. It is simply to say that by going through this third party evaluation process, that actually allows the value of that raw comic to be realized because it's being reviewed by a third party. It's being de-risked. All of the defects and things like that are being surfaced in this comic, and once that grade is applied to it, it gives people the ability to look up that value in a pricing service. And so that very briefly is how third-party grading works. Now, with that said, one of the huge benefits that CGC has that allows them to be a dominant force is their parent company. Their parent company had its start with paper money and coins. They brought all of that expertise over to comics and collectibles. And as a result of that, that has given them a huge advantage. When that parent company of CGC was acquired about a year ago, that acquiring company placed a value on all of CGC of around $550 million. And that is a ton of money. So CGC's ability to have those deep pockets behind them has given them a huge advantage, a huge leg up. Now you compare that to a company like CBCS. CBCS a few years ago actually sold themselves to Beckett because they realized that to be competitive, they needed deeper pockets. CGC started with those deep pockets from the beginning, and that is part of the reason why they are so dominant. Over the last 2 years, we have seen record-breaking sales for comics. And whenever that news breaks and that comic has sold for hundreds of thousands of dollars or millions of dollars, more often than not, that comic is associated with CGC. You see it in USA Today. You see it if you search on Google. You see it on the Heritage and Comic Link social media pages. Record-breaking sales, CGC comic. And as a result of that association, there is a certain image that people have of CGC. There is also a certain amount of prestige that is associated with the brand because of those record-breaking sales, those crazy numbers, and CGC go hand in hand. And again, it's not to take away anything from any of the grading companies that are out there doing good work, but when you think about record-breaking sales and comic books, you're thinking CGC. To my previous point, CGC is widely recognized as the industry leader when it comes to graded comic books. It's not to take anything away from anybody else, but it is undeniable that they are the industry leader. And as I mentioned earlier, there are a lot of folks that have their opinions about CGC, but their leadership position is not something that is up for debate. And to that point, this is a factor that allows them to be dominant. It might also be a factor as to why you want to focus on CGC books. The fourth point that I want to make is that CGC books tend to command a higher value in the market. Now, this is a different point than the one that I made a moment ago about the record-breaking sales. We're at the other end of the spectrum where normal people are buying books. But generally speaking, CGC books go for more money. We recently did a small analysis here on the channel where we looked at about 15 books between CGC and CBCS. And in almost every instance, the CGC book went for more. Not every instance, but generally speaking, CGC came out on top. I think we need to do a much larger analysis looking at a few different data points to see whether this holds true. But generally speaking, this analysis that we did has been very consistent with ones that have been done by other people. So I feel very comfortable to say it. But again, this is something that we want to look at moving forward. Overall, my point here is that everything that I've spoken about thus far in the video potentially lends itself to what I just said about CGC books commanding a higher value in the market. The fifth and final point that I'll make is that CGC is an innovative company. And in my mind, an innovative company is one that will have some success. And if they are truly innovative, they will have continued success because they're not going to be afraid to try different things, some of which may work, some of which may fail. But if you think about it, CGC actually started the market. They brought over their expertise. Technically, the parent company brought over the expertise from paper money and coins to comics. They started graded comic books. And so that first mover advantage has been something that they've used to their advantage to dominate. Now, that doesn't mean that they will win in the future, but that first mover advantage is hard for another company to overcome, especially when the other companies are not as innovative as CGC appears to be. So they started this entire market. The other thing that they did is they introduced a registry. They allow people, collectors, to show off their collections in a registry and to also win prizes for that. That builds brand loyalty. Believe it or not, people love registries. They love to show off what they have, and people certainly love to get awards. Another innovative thing that CGC has done is introduce customized labels. They have specifically partnered up with Marvel and given people the ability to pick from a handful of labels and have those applied to their comics. Fingers crossed that CGC actually does a similar deal with DC, because I think there are a lot of people out there that would love to have Batman or Superman or Green Lantern or one of these other characters from DC applied to their DC comics. So fingers crossed that that happens at some point down the road. Another very interesting thing that CGC did is that they actually partnered with eBay. And at one point they were eBay's approved third-party grading company, which gave them the ability to integrate themselves into eBay. And this integration allowed people to actually, before purchasing a comic, to have that comic evaluated by someone at CGC to give that purchaser a rough idea of the grade of that comic, right? They would get an impartial third party's evaluation of that comic from the photos that were available online. That is innovative. And I honestly don't know whether anybody took advantage of this. I don't know if the service is still being offered, but it is an interesting innovation. And I honestly would not be surprised if CGC and eBay found a way to work together again in the future. And I say that because eBay is currently doing some things with fractionalization. And I don't know if folks know what fractionalization is, but it's essentially when they take a tangible asset, they hold that tangible asset in a vault, and they convert it into an NFT. They then break that NFT up into fractional shares that can be owned by different people. And this is another way for eBay to earn some revenue. And so I would not be surprised if CGC got involved with that somehow eBay started to offer up fractional shares of collectibles that had been graded by CGC. And I don't know if this is something that's in the works. I honestly don't. My point here is that this is an innovation. For better or worse, NFTs are going to be around. For better or worse, eBay and CGC have found ways to be innovative. They have found ways to be ahead of the curve. And potentially, this is something that we might actually see in the future. With that said, I'm going to wrap this video up. My goal here was to try to highlight a few reasons why CGC is such a dominant force and why maybe you want to focus on getting CGC books and adding them to your collection. As always, I look forward to reading your comments down in the comment section, so don't be shy about leaving your thoughts behind. And if you need to reach out to me for whatever reason, feel free to do that on Instagram at Regie Collects. Take care.